Hey there, folks! Well, in this video, I'm happy to announce that we will put an end to a mysterious disappearance that occurred over 47 years ago. Finally, in a case which has been speculated about for decades, a case where the paranormal was often considered the prime suspect, we will get answers. I am, of course, speaking of the disappearance of Steven Kubacki. Steven has released a book explaining his disappearance, and he granted me the honor of being the first to talk to him about what happened and why it happened. It's a good thing to finally be able to put this one to bed. I mean, countless articles, books, videos, and media have been made on this one disappearance because of how anomalous it seemed. It's quite rare for us to finally get the full story for something like this. Before we get into the explanation of the disappearance, I thought it would be best to quickly explain the story of Steven Kubacki and what happened on a frozen Lake, Michigan back in 1978. But before we continue, I want to thank Raycon for sponsoring this video. It's Raycon's anniversary and they're currently celebrating with a great deal of 20% off their Everyday Earbuds Classic. This is the perfect time to get your hands on these for either yourself or a gift for someone else. I've been using Raycons for well over a year now, so I have no problem recommending them to everyone. Raycons are my personal all-purpose earbuds. I've been using them on planes, in cars, but most importantly, I use them outdoors. As you may know, I spend a fair amount of time hiking or walking in the woods. The ergonomic fit of Raycon's earbuds makes it so that they stay put no matter what you're doing. That's always been a big selling point for me, and Raycons meet that standard. One other reason I love using them outdoors is because they have awareness mode, which helps you stay tuned into what's happening around you. When you're hiking, that's a balance you tend to want to keep. You want to listen to something, but also be aware of your surroundings. Awareness mode does exactly that, which makes them perfect for my needs. Beyond all this, there are a lot of other features that make Raycons great. Their ability to quick charge gives you 90 minutes of playtime for just 10 minutes of charging time. In addition, there is up to 32 hours of battery life when using the case. So again, all of this adds up to why Raycons really are the best all-around earbud, and also the ones I use. Despite that, they are still quite affordable, and right now you can click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/TME to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. That's buyraycon.com/TME for 20% off. And thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Steven Kubacki grew up in South Deerfield, Massachusetts with his mother Irene, father John, and brother John Jr. Early on in his youth, it became apparent that Steven had quite an intellect, with test scores that were off the charts. Despite this, Steven had a rebellious streak, and he often found himself getting into trouble or acting out. His family were not wealthy by any means, and he had a very blue-collar upbringing. That's why his parents felt particularly blessed when Steven was granted a full scholarship to the prestigious Deerfield Academy, an elite school usually reserved for those with wealth. While there, Steven couldn't help but notice the differences between him and his classmates. During the summer, they were on extravagant vacations, while he would be working in tobacco fields just to earn enough money to afford his school clothing. At the end of his tenure at Deerfield, Steven probably could have had his pick of elite higher education institutions, but instead he chose Hope College in Holland, Michigan. Something about the school spoke to him, as did the general terrain surrounding the town. Steven had always been an avid outdoorsman between cross-country skiing and mountain climbing. He was also focused on getting into medical school, which Hope College could help him do. Once Steven made it to Michigan, he discovered a new form of freedom. He made friends, socialized, and explored the surrounding forests, including Lake Michigan. Still, he maintained his rebellious nature. Steven's intelligence was evident to his professors, with G.L. Penrose, who taught Steven, saying that he was very intense and very, very bright. He was intellectually engaged in a number of things. He was always intensely involved. He was not your average student in terms of intellect. He is much brighter. Steven lived off campus, usually with a roommate. He was known for playing Dungeons and Dragons and also for being a big Tolkien fan. Eventually, Steven's interests turned from medicine to philosophy and the German language. As luck would have it, he received a scholarship to study abroad in his junior year, and so he picked the University of Freiburg in Germany. He spent a year there where he studied various topics, including Jungian psychology and even parapsychology. By 1978, Steven was back at Hope College and doing the usual college routine. His parents had separated and were no longer living together. He was a 23-year-old man who was only 9 credit hours away from graduating. With such a bright future ahead of him, no one could have imagined that he could or would disappear so suddenly. When the day of February 18, 1978 rolled around, it should have simply been a day like any other. It was a cold winter's morning with an abundance of snow and ice. Only a few weeks prior, Michigan was hit by the Great Blizzard of 1978, which caused a state of emergency. Steven would be undeterred by all of this. He was an avid cross-country skier who often went out on the frozen Lake Michigan. In fact, he was known for venturing out great distances and taking great risks. He left the attic apartment that he shared with his roommate that morning, carrying only his skis and a backpack. His route of travel was a few miles through Holland and onto the beaches of Lake Michigan. Nobody was on the lake that morning, except him, maybe because it was too dangerous or too cold. As Steven skied out onto the frozen water, it was hard to miss the great spires of ice that towered around him. These ice sheets had been moving and piling up for weeks in order to create the surreal landscape that he slowly glided across. As Steven heads out further into the alien terrain, he is stopped suddenly by a strange, anomalous feeling. He is calm as he slowly breathes in the frigid air. He stares up into the gray, overcast expanse of clouds. Something happens there. The sky seems to part as if it were sliced open by some unseen force. There is a strange kinetic energy in the air. A strange object hovers in the empty void above. Or does it? Maybe it didn't happen that way after all. Who knows what happened to Steven Kubacki that day? The only thing the public knows is that Steven went missing. A search for him was conducted in the area, but all they found was his backpack, skis, and ski poles. All were purposefully placed near the frozen shores of Lake Michigan. Beyond his belongings, Steven left a set of footprints in the snow. They led out onto the ice for some 200 yards and then ended abruptly. It appeared as though Steven vanished into thin air. The search would involve helicopters, foot searchers, snowmobiles, tracking dogs, and divers who risked their lives searching for breaks in the frozen lake ice. Wherever Steven was, he was no longer here. The search was fruitless and eventually came to an end after less than a week. Steven was awarded an honorary bachelor's degree in absentia. It was accepted by his parents. Many thought that Steven had been swallowed up by a break in the ice, though there was nothing near his footprints that suggested it. Still, many assumed that his body would show up in the spring, when the ice would melt. It did not. Likely, nobody expected what eventually did happen. Over a year later, on May 5, 1979, Steven Kubacki woke up in a meadow outside Pittsfield, Massachusetts, but he claimed to not know where he was, or even who he was. He was wearing clothes that he didn't recognize, and a shirt from a marathon in Wisconsin. He had a backpack nearby with clothes, equipment, maps, and eyeglasses inside. When he reached the town of Pittsfield, he stopped to look at the date on a newspaper, and a whole host of memories came flooding back to him. He remembered that he was Steven Kubacki, and he knew he had a relative who lived only a short distance away. From there, Steven would make contact with his aunt, and subsequently his parents. The media descended on the homecoming event like vultures, seeking to pick apart the mystery behind Steven's anomalous return to the land of the living. But Steven told them that he didn't know what happened. He had amnesia. Whatever had happened in the past 14 months or so, Steven said he couldn't remember any of it. The answers that everyone desired were not to be had, or at least Steven was not giving up his secret if he had one. His parents were perhaps too happy to have their son back to pry too much into what he did or did not know about his disappearance, and the newspaper reporters eventually went away when they realized they weren't going to get the story that they wanted. Steven could go back to living the life he had before he disappeared so suddenly one winter morning. And that's exactly what he did. Steven went on to become a psychologist working in Seattle, Washington. He also became an author when he co-authored the book Metamathematical Foundations of Existence, And throughout all of that time, some 47 years, the public never knew the truth of Steven's disappearance. Which brings us up to date with this video, where I'll let Steven tell his story of what happened that day on the ice. Steve.
Hi.
Thank you for coming over, and thank you for choosing to talk about your story. Read the book, and it was great. I was really happy to finally get the full story of your disappearance. And I know there's a lot of people out there with a lot of questions still. And I'm happy we're doing this follow-up because I know in our last interview people were, understandably a little disappointed. But obviously you had to save a lot of information for the book. We couldn't just release everything on, a podcast, and you get so much more detail out of a book anyway.
Yes, for sure.
But now that your book's out, and which can be purchased at Amazon, by the way.
Or Barnes & Noble.
Or Barnes & Noble.
Any bookseller that you like.
We'll put links in the description.
Okay.
So now that we're able to finally have a bit more of an open conversation, and we're not going to talk about everything. We've already agreed on that. But a lot of questions obviously surround what happened that day on the ice. So I was wondering if you could just, let's start with that day. Can you kind of walk me through that day in your mind on what happened from when you woke up and decided to go for a skiing adventure?
Yeah. Well, it was more than just a skiing adventure. I was at that day, I was in an incredibly heightened state of awareness. I was about to do kind of what most people would think the unthinkable. I was about to disappear and change my name to Nathan T. Stanfield. And the event would be irreversible, once I did it. And my life would change. And so, I don't know, I was just really kind of jazzed up, really, about the whole thing. It felt like there was like I was being guided by the universe or the incomprehensible, that I had this sort of sense that I was really connected with what was going on. In many, the disappearance is really very multifaceted. It's not just a political or economic call to action. It also has a kind of a transcendental calling that some people might think of as spiritual. Others might think maybe it's somebody psychologically driven within, or we were psychologically driven within, because it's more than just me. I had co-conspirators. We had a vision. There was a sense of hope. And there was a lot of rage towards the injustices of the world as we saw them. And so we wanted to do something different. And in many ways, I felt just kind of open to the universe. I was going to let the universe guide me and just see, who knows what was going to happen. The whole thing could have just fallen apart. Well, actually it did eventually. But I was just open to see what would happen. So.
But there was a plan in place that day, right? You had it was well thought out.
It was incredibly well thought out. It was a group of us got together and we decided that I should disappear. The idea of the disappearance kind of backdates that a little bit. I remember I was having a conversation with Walter, who was the person in the book, and I was just sort of, just didn't know what to do with myself because I didn't want to, I could graduate and do some good things in the world, but I just felt that I would be absorbed by the system, by the establishment, and that any kind of real radical change, anything that would really change the system, would not be possible. So I said, well, maybe I should disappear. Though I didn't know what that meant till many, many months later. And then many months later, it became, there was a group of us, and we met, and we decided that, that my disappearance could cement us all, connect us all together in a kind of a deep commitment, and that I would go underground as Nathan T. Stanfield and disappear on the ice. And the other co-conspirators would then pursue more traditional avenues towards power and fame and wealth.
Why was it important for you to disappear while your other co-conspirators could kind of continue leading their lives? Why was it important for you to have to die, essentially?
Well, I had to die in order to go underground and connect with other people underground to help sort of develop a kind of resistance to what we saw as the powers that be. In order to do that, I had to go underground, and it was also just a way to cement things. I guess there's a possibility I didn't have to go underground.
Well, I guess people would be looking for you even harder if they had thought you kind of had lived, or people were still looking for you.
I mean, if I, decided to join some kind of, like French Foreign Legion or something, anyways, people would want to, still keep track of me. And it was smarter that I would just cut all ties, all family ties, all ties with friends, which I do still now regret. I still feel guilty about the suffering I caused my family and my friends with the disappearance, because they had no idea what happened. So.
And, well, I mean, you've experienced something I think few people can ever say they've done. I mean, I was trying to put myself in your shoes of walking out on the ice that day and making those footprints, putting the backpack down, and then walking back on your own footprints to make it look like you had just kind of vanished, and what it would be like to just know that Steven Kubacki, as we know it, he's gone, and now there's someone else.
Right.
It's really hard to even imagine, So what kind of emotions were you having at that point?
Well, I was pretty exhilarated by
I would imagine.
Thing. Yeah, exhilaration, and I don't know, I just was just looking towards the future.
Like you were finally getting something done.
I was on a mission.
Yeah.
We had a mission, and part of the mission was that I would disappear. And why was I chosen to disappear, or why did I guess because I was probably the most fed up with everything around me, and I just didn't see I didn't see a future that I would like by just sort of following a more traditional route and going to graduate school or doing whatever.
And at the time, did you set up your disappearance kind of in the sense that did you have any idea in your mind that people would say, oh, Steven got abducted by UFOs or something? He went into a time portal? Was that in your mind?
That it did not cross my mind
really?
In the least. It did not cross my mind at all. I know there's a lot of talk about that. But actually, what really kind of happened was when I went on the ice, I kind of I really dissociated. It's kind of like I split, like in some of the kind of multiverse paradigms in physics. It's kind of like I bifurcated, and I returned as Nathan T. Stanfield back to the shore and went to Mexico. But there was another part of me that was still on the ice, and it felt almost as if I went under the ice, and I had a sense of kind of being in some other dimension. And it took a long time to kind of remember kind of what happened. But it felt as if I was with beings of light and was kind of in an energy shell of some sort, not a flying saucer. I wasn't abducted, no flying saucers. It was really kind of interdimensional. It's taken a long time to kind of remember all the different things that kind of went on around all that.
And I would imagine, like, when people hear you say that, they might have some difficulty understanding exactly what you mean, right? Like, because you talk about, the multiverse and all this stuff. Have you been experiencing these kind of things your entire life, or,
I had some prior experiences when I was real little. I remember seeing my dead brother's kind of spirit or ghost, and that, and then I had a variety of different experiences. There's a lot that went on in my childhood and adolescence, but adolescence was very difficult for me. I remember standing on a pole near my yard for like a half an hour and just sitting there and meditating. So I kind of got into altered states in that way. And I remember I started reading a lot about shamanism and Zen Buddhism when I was at Deerfield Academy, and began to explore that more. And I didn't really do any drugs at all. I had friends who did drugs when I was at Deerfield, but I didn't really try any kind of psychedelics till I went to Hope College. That's when and that kind of opened some things for me. It's really an amazing way.
For someone like me, I've never had a paranormal or anomalous experience that I can recall. So when I hear stuff like what in this book and what you just described, almost makes me kind of envious in a way, because it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like. Is this something that you think you've
No, I don't think it's special.
You don't?
I mentioned before that I was, I'm a PhD psychologist
right.
now, so I'm trying to understand kind of what went on. And from a psychological perspective, I had a massive dissociation on the ice, which could be, these dissociations can lead to like PTSD and trauma. That's kind of the negative line, but also can be more visionary, more kind of a positive thing, which is what happened to me. But we're disassociating all the time. When you dream, you're dissociating. When you're having conversations in your head with nobody around, you're dissociating. When you're driving and you can't figure out how you got from one place to the next, you're dissociating. We are actually dissociating a lot of the time in our life. We're in our heads, we're somewhere else, we're having memories. We're thinking of things that could be or might be, all kinds of things. So we're constantly disassociating. So that capacity for all of us is there, but you can be trained. You can train yourself in something I call constructive dissociation, not destructive like PTSD, where you can learn to enter altered states through either meditation or there's shamanic techniques, there's prayer. There's a whole variety of different ways of entering these other states. And without drugs or with drugs, and then experiencing these other dimensions, these other universes. So but there is a training there. You have to practice it, and in some again I call it constructive dissociation as a way to kind of unify all the different kinds of methods like meditation and shamanic journeying and prayer and other such things, ecstatic dancing, this whole all kinds of stuff. Sex. Some people have all kinds of visionary experiences sometimes, when they're having sex.
So when you walked back off that ice, would you say you felt like Nathan T. Stanfield and no longer like Steven Kubacki in that sense?
Well, no, because I struggled with it. I had a lot of nightmares when I took the bus to Mexico, and I felt I had a horrible nightmare. I felt I was being attacked by my kind of the Buddhist way of thinking about it, by sort of like hungry ghosts, kind of going after my negative energy, because I created a lot of negative energy by disappearing. I mean, it was quite a havoc. I read about it later about what went on, but it was quite the drama, and and a lot of tremendous suffering that I created by doing that, but. We did it for a higher purpose. Now, you can say that was delusional or an illusion, but that's what we did, and we wanted to take action and somehow make the world a better place. We were really focused on, we just saw all the authoritarian structures in our world and didn't see how we would be able to change them. I grew up at a time was after the Vietnam War, so there was all this hate, there was war. There was all this corporate malfeasance going on, environmental destruction. There's this tremendous hate and authoritarianism going on all over the place. And and right now, I think it's even worse now than it was way back in the late 70s. But that was part of kind of the motivations.
And well, actually, before I get to that, I did have one. This is kind of a minor thing, but it made me laugh when I read it in your book. When you got back off the ice, you had a getaway car.
All right.
And you went to go to the getaway car, and the car doesn't start. It's a lemon. It doesn't start. Did that seem like maybe even like a message from the universe or something? Like maybe you shouldn't do this? Or
No, that didn't come from me as a message to you. I just thought it was, kind of Keystone Cops. I mean, in a way,
if you read the book, I didn't do anything that you would call violent. I didn't, I didn't kill. I didn't do anything like. None of us did anything like that. So there was kind of a comic quality to the whole thing in an odd way. And in my writings, I wrote a lot during this time, and some of my writings and other people's writings are in the book. And there's a lot of kind of like sarcasm about ourselves. It's kind of, we're pretty critical about what we're doing and if we're going to do it, and perhaps a little too much thinking in that regard.
for sure. And so the name of your, I don't know, revolutionary group was called the Nexalistic Revolutionary Front, right?
Yeah.
And how did you come up with that name? What is Nexalism?
Okay, well, first of all, back then in the 70s, something like Revolutionary Front was not an uncommon word.
Right.
I know that's completely weird now, like Revolutionary Front, what is that, you know? But back then it was sort of a common word. And the word Nexalism comes from a book by A.E. Van Vogt, that's V-O-G-T. It's called The Voyage of the Space Beagle. In The Voyage of the Space Beagle, there is a guy named Grosvenor, who is a Nexalist. And a Nexalist is somebody who knows how to integrate across many different scientific disciplines, humanities, and art. So he kind of understands the methodologies and the assumptions behind all the different domains of knowledge. And because he's not constrained or compartmentalized within any particular discipline, any particular science or humanity or art, he is able then to think outside the box. And by being able to think outside the box, he can then integrate all these different methodologies and come up with solutions. So it's a spaceship, the Space Beagle, and they encounter all kinds of threats, and he's able to figure them out. Okay, well, it's I guess it's kind of, you know, Nexalist is kind of a little bit like a Renaissance man, you might say, that somebody who integrates across a wide variety of different, you know, disciplines and areas and thinks outside the box creatively to, you know, to come up with solutions. So that's why we called it. So,
and were your co-conspirators, as you call them, were they kind of were they already familiar with these ideas? Did you discuss these ideas?
The Nexalism was some discussion with some of the co-conspirators. I think everybody was on board with the word. Or the ideas and the concepts.
And so this group of your, I mean, it seems like it would be tough, you know, even today, to get a group of people together to all agree on something so serious. I mean, all your friends would have to keep this a secret.
Yes.
All kinds of things would have to go. These are long-term plans.
Right.
I feel like it'd be hard to find people to get on board with that, but you found people that were willing to do that.
Well, yeah, you're right. It was a kind of interesting confluence of people coming together who would probably never come together. You know, we're all pretty smart. We're all kind of high energy. We're all, you know, we all have our own vision. You know, the group of us and visions, and normally I think we would go our separate paths and do whatever we're going to do. It's very unusual when you get a group of people like we were together. And I think it was circumstance, maybe it was destiny. I've always, I know it sounds a little peculiar, but even from when I was very young, I always felt I had a purpose. I felt I had a mission, even though I didn't understand what that was. And it had something to do with making the world a better place. You know, I remember writing in journals and when I was in 10th grade about, you know, why doesn't everybody love each other? You know, the usual stuff that people write about. And it really, really bothered me, you know, that. And then I know I'm kind of, the other side of that was when I went to Deerfield Academy, you know, I was really exposed to what it was like to be with wealthy people and powerful people. Deerfield Academy is one of the most prestigious prep schools in the country. And I came from a lower middle class family. My father worked in a factory all his life and went on strikes. My mother worked as administrative assistant, at the University of Massachusetts, and I worked in tobacco fields when I was 13. You know, over 100-degree heat, and I did
time.
Yeah, no, and I worked in all kinds of factories, and so you know, the kids I hung around with at Deerfield during summer, you know, they would go to Switzerland for summer camp. You know, I worked to buy my clothes, you know, so I could look okay when I went to Deerfield Academy, because you had to have a suit, you'd have to have a sports jacket and a tie, and you know, the whole 9 yards.
Well, that's another thing that really surprises me, though, because, I mean, you come from this completely different background, and it seemed like some of your co-conspirators were more of the wealthier side.
Some of them were.
And it seems to me like, how do you convince someone who has that privilege and has their you know, potentially a really great life ahead of them in terms of wealth and materialism? How do you convince them out of that?
I didn't have to convince them, because they're pretty fed up with where they came from. Yeah, they are pretty alienated and estranged from their, you know, from their families in different ways. They wanted to make a difference in the world. They saw that their futures, if they kind of did what they were supposed to do, was kind of all laid out. And again, it didn't mean that they wouldn't help the world in different ways, but not in a very, revolutionary way, not in a very major way. I mean, all the major changes that we see, in society have come about because of revolutions. The American Revolution, there are technological revolutions, electricity, quantum theory, computers. There's all kinds of economic. I mean, just there's changes between revolutions and major events like that. I guess we felt we needed to do something more than just reform things.
Well, what's kind of interesting to read in your book, it almost seems like the plan was that there is no strict plan. Right? There was no super structured plan. We had kind of a general idea. We know the direction we're trying to go.
Yeah, we were doing something no one's ever done before.
Right.
The way we were doing it.
And so, you couldn't have a linear plan. There was no, you couldn't get it. There was no project manager for this plan, that could say, do this, that didn't exist. So we had, we were trying to figure out as we went along. I mean, we had definite ideas. Like splitting the NRF, the Next Ballistic Revolutionary Front, and what we call the left arm, which is what I would do. I would go underground and try to develop a sense of resistance among people to change things, kind of a more traditional,
kind of revolutionary
build an army, kind of.
Yeah, more revolutionary sense in some ways.
And then the other people were in the right arm, and they were supposed to do things like get into politics, go into businesses, religion, law, a variety of different things. And then we would get the idea was that we would all come together at some point, and then we would be unstoppable, and we would then be able to change things. And one of the things we really wanted to change was we really wanted to democratize everything. That was very important to us. People don't think about it, but we live most of our time in authoritarian institutions. We vote once every 2 or 4 years. But most of the people live in jobs that are very authoritarian, very corporate, very top-down, medieval-like structures. And we seem to be okay with it for the most part. I mean, sometimes there are challenges. But, most of us live in pretty authoritarian situations all the time. I mean, that's a lot better here than Russia,
right.
For sure. Right. But,
Do you think it would be difficult for people that kind of live, even it may be authoritarian as you say, but people would they have a sense of comfort, right?
Yeah.
And so would you think it would be difficult to break them out of that system where their minds have, I mean, do they know anything else?
Well, I'm a psychologist, so I have a lot of clients who work at some of the big corporations like Amazon and Microsoft, et cetera, and these are not, a lot of times, very happy people. A lot of people who work there, they work tremendous hours. They feel exploited. But it's very hard for them to stand up for themselves. And they generally have people way above them who are not as smart as they are, but yet are in a position of power. And there's all these politics. And, I know it sounds like a funny idea, but, in some ways, if you look at Amazon, there's no reason why all the people, some of the people at Amazon couldn't get together and say, oh, we're just going to start our own Amazon. Heck with all this money going to, these rich people, these executives. And we don't need them. We can create our own, management, et cetera, and have it completely democratized and actually do a lot better.
Which, so it's a huge change, no doubt.
I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So.
Well, and that's why, you when you were young with your co-conspirators, you had grand plans.
Yeah.
Did you have any doubt in your mind at that time?
We had doubt
whether we could achieve what we wanted. I mean, who knows? Any of us could have gotten killed in different ways, or, we could have gotten seduced by power, or, who knows what would have happened. It's hard to tell with all these things. When you really look at history is really based on a lot of chances, being in the right place at the right time, and it's very unpredictable. Extremely unpredictable. It's very easy to look back and people say, well, it was because of this and that. But when you're in the middle of it, you really have no idea what's going to happen. And being in the right place at the right time and using your intuition and everything can help you achieve things.
Well, that's one thing that noted. There's probably a lot of people out there, I'd imagine, who have come up with ideas for revolution and whatnot, but they have no follow through. That's what impressed me, is that you had these pretty grand ideas and you went through with it, or you tried to.
Yeah.
Went through with some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, we were people of action, what I call praxis. We wanted to take ideas and turn them into action, and that's always been my life. My life has always been about taking action, throwing the dice, and sort of risking it all at times. Like then, I just threw all the dice. And I have done that before. And after that, not in the same way, okay? I didn't disappear again by any means, but I think the willingness to take action is difficult. We spend a lot of our times in our minds. We spend a lot of our times dimming our lights, or other people dimming our light bulbs, and where we could be a lot more than we are, but we've learned to dim ourselves, and we're okay. We've learned to accept that. And we have a culture industry that's like a drug, and so lots of times people turn to the culture industry to fill themselves up, to fill the emptiness inside, but it doesn't long-term work, and that's why we have so many very unhappy people in our world, and alienated and depressed and anxious.
It sounds like you still hold a lot of those same beliefs that you did back when you started the NRF.
Yeah. I would still say
Even 45 years
still
later.
say I'm a nextist.
Okay.
I'm gonna admit.
But I've changed a lot. One of the things that definitely was, it's easy to look back and what you could have done differently. But the secrecy thing was wrong. That would have ended up sabotage. Even if we were successful, we would have sabotaged it, because secrecy then leads to power getting accumulated in various hands, and so now I've come to the idea that things need to be radically transparent, and part of that's why I've written the book, is to be as radically transparent as I can, and I think it's through radical transparency that things can really change. I mean, it'd be really interesting to know what's in the books on all the corporations and what's going on in government and et cetera, if there was, really transparency. And that would give people then the ability to really make the decisions they want. But if you control things, if you're secretive, then ultimately, you can't really democratize things. Secrecy and democracy don't go together. We didn't get that way back then. And also, I think violence is just not a way to go about doing anything.
And I mean, I don't know if you want to get into it or not,
Sure.
but at the time you started the NRF, had you guys talked about whether violence would have to be a part of a revolution?
We talked about it. We were trying not to be violent. We didn't want to go down that path. We prefer probably taking a more kind of Martin Luther King, something like that. But sometimes things get impossible, and sometimes that's why people take up arms. That's why we had the American Revolution. Right. That things you can't do anything. So, that was there. That was a possibility. And it's actually, I did some training in that kind of direction in the book. So,
did you ever worry about, you have to have a lot of trust, I would imagine, with your co-conspirators, because at any time, if any one of them just kind of lapses in their commitment to this, they could reveal everything, and then everything's just blown, right?
Well, if they revealed, they'd be in trouble too. I disappeared. They had helicopters looking for me,
right.
Et cetera, et cetera. People would get in trouble. When I reemerged, I said I had amnesia, but I said I had amnesia in order to protect my co-conspirators and I, so that they could move forward with their lives.
Gotcha.
And I've protected them for over 45 years. And really, and the book is written so all the names of the co-conspirators and where they came from, that's all been changed to protect them. So if they want to come out and say who they are, they can do that. But that's not my, it wouldn't be my right to do that. But
gotcha.
But so it. Again, I really repetitious, but it really kind of the disappearance cemented us, and I don't think anybody was going to tell anybody.
Right, cemented by this kind of great act of
and then
secrecy.
Because anybody would if somebody knew that you were part of this sort of the NRF and you were trying to make it through politics, what do you think is going to happen to you? or becoming a banker or something, or probably not going to work so well. So I took the heat. And I tried to change my life and redirect my life after I reemerged. And I had all kinds of movie requests for movies, all kinds of things, but I put that behind me completely. And I didn't want to. So that's why I've been quiet for 45 years, because I didn't want my life to be based on that only. And I've done a lot of other things since then.
Yeah, I'm surprised. So, small point, I guess. Requests for movies say if they hadn't had the full story yet, what are they going to do the movie about?
Well,
they wanted you to reveal. The full
of course,
story?
of course,
Okay.
right, of course.
So I wasn't, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want my life to be totally defined by this event. It's an important event in my life, and it's had tremendous impact on my thinking and other things I've been writing and hoping to get published. But I probably wouldn't have gotten my PhD in psychology if I.
So you didn't want to always be known as just the guy who disappeared and came back with amnesia.
Right, exactly.
And so this is probably a way to move on from that in a sense, huh?
This book is kind of a way to, I'm getting it out there, and hopefully, people see it of some value. I hope it's inspirational. I think it's connected with kind of coming of age and,
absolutely,
and trying to find out who you are. And I think it might resonate with a lot of young people and people in their 20s. That we can do something to change the world. People can do something.
Are you still in touch with any members of the NRF today?
Yes, I am.
Really?
Yeah, I know where all them all. There's one particular I'm in touch with. Everybody.
So those, for the most part, some of those friendships have held out through 45 years.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You spend much time thinking about back then, like your time as Nathan Stanfield. Today, do you still think about it?
Well, I had to write the book, so I have to think about it. But
you're just in your daily life.
In some ways, I think this is kind of a little odd way of thinking about it, but what I did, you considered very illegitimate. Disappearing, underground revolution. The whole thing is quite illegitimate in most people's eyes. And after I reemerged, I kind of swung in the opposite direction. I decided to follow more a path of legitimacy, and so that's why I became got a PhD in psychology, a master's in linguistics, a variety of different things, because I wanted to do good in that realm. And I think the book is kind of, I guess for me, is kind of a bringing the two worlds back together again. The kind of radical world and the more, I guess, traditional ways of trying to help people, and putting that all together. And for the book has, made me do a lot of thinking about other things, and I have some other books coming out, hopefully. In the near future.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Well, give us a little taste of what is your plan for the future to continue writing or continue thoughts on the multiverse, or what's your future?
My future is to get some books out that I've been writing for some time. One of them is called The Multiverse Guide to Humanity, and it's all a way of looking at the multiverse and applying the ideas of the multiverse to help people kind of develop more of the good life and to understand how they can live better and happier lives. So that's sort of that focus.
Almost like a multiverse self-help book.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of principles in it about what people can do to improve their lives. And if you think of the multiverse, the version that fits in most closely with quantum mechanics is that there are an infinite number of universes, an infinite number of yous. There's just infinite amount of everything in quantum theory, and when you think about how does that similar to what we do as humans? What's similar to that? And one of the things I thought of was it's very similar to love, because love is all about expansion, connecting, creating more connections, accepting, and the multiverse has that kind of expansiveness and that kind of all those sort of connections. The positive emotions are kind of more affiliated with that, whereas negative emotions are generally contract. They contract you more, like fear and hate. So they make your world smaller. Whereas positive emotions make your world bigger, sort of like the multiverse.
So is the multiverse something you can, like, you think an individual can connect with in a certain way, or?
Yeah.
Well, then I might be interested in your book, because I was curious, if how to do that, in a sense, because it's such a big part in a lot of your writings, not just this book.
Yeah.
And it's a concept I'm still trying to, wrap my head around. I get the general concept, and I think it's quite fascinating. It's something I've often thought of as, being quite legitimate, really. I mean, as much as it's almost impossible to imagine, when I think about it. But reading through some of your experiences and whatnot, it seems like you've found a way to connect with it in which most people maybe haven't.
Well, again, I spoke a little earlier about dissociating. Right. We're always dissociating.
The training.
So it's a training, and I call it constructive dissociation. But another way of thinking about it is, traversing the multiverse. That we can do that, and we are doing that sometimes in our dreams without knowing it. Sometimes we have visions. Sometimes we know things we shouldn't have known. We shouldn't know. Where did that come from? But there is a training you can do, and I talk about that in this book.
I had a question about lessons that you may have learned from the NRF and your adventures in this book that you might think were particularly relevant to today's political climate.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people would say radicalism today. You were involved in some sense in radical. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that in general?
Well, I think, as I talked about before, I think we need to challenge authoritarian structures and just not cave into them. And we need to think about kind of how we, on every day, how are we living our lives on the everyday? When you work, what kind of organization is that? Is it a helpful organization? Is it authoritarian? Do you have any say? And to begin to think about those things. And and maybe people think more about them and begin to challenge the authority-based systems we have. Then maybe there will be change. Maybe people will move in the right direction, and we'll have progress of some sort. I mean, things are a lot different than they were thousands of years ago. They're a hell of a lot better now than they were way back when. But the destruction of the environment is continuing relentlessly.
But perhaps, unlike your younger self, I would assume today you're certainly probably an advocate of nonviolence in approaches, right?
Yeah, I think because violence is a misuse of power. Always, I think it's always creates harm and suffering. So ultimately, I don't know. It's if somebody else is using violence against you, like in World War II or something, you got to do something. Right. You got to fight back, or they're not going to allow themselves to crush you and take you over or kill you. But that's a whole different kind of situation and context. So.
Gosh, I think we've covered a lot of the main stuff I wanted to go through.
Yeah.
I had a couple fun questions for you, if you want to.
Sure.
You're a big Tolkien fan, right?
Yeah.
You're familiar with the Lord of the Rings movies? Did you? You watched those?
Yeah, I watched them.
Because Tolkien actually comes up in your book quite a bit. I was surprised to see. So big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yeah,
and you read it in German too, right?
Yeah, I've read it in German. Yeah, and I can even recite the little rhyme at the beginning of Three Rings for Elven Kings. I can do that in German. Drei Ringen in Elbenkönigen, hochgelieg, 7 in Zwergen herrschen, in Holland auf Stein, eins den dunklen Herren auf dunklen Thron, der Land der Mordor, wo die Schatten ruhen. Much scarier German.
Yeah, right? It almost sounds like you're speaking Orcish or something there. You watched the new series Rings of Power?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
What'd you think?
I liked it.
Okay,
That's pretty good.
Checking.
Yeah. It's quite a divisive. I wanted to get the Kubacki tape.
What does it mean I liked it? I
especially liked the second season. I thought was
an improvement.
Well, I don't know improvement, but it was really good to kind of get into the character of Sauron and to see how evil he was and how he brainwashed, used what people wanted against them, and kind of sucked them into like Celebrimbor and making the rings and all that.
See him in a little different sense than just a big guy in armor who's just kind of always in the background.
The first season you're like almost sympathetic with him a little bit.
A little too much,
a little bit like, well, maybe he's not such a bad guy, you know?
Right.
Maybe he's not. But, well, of course, towards the end of the first season, you begin to realize he's definitely a bad guy.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to get the take from a true Tolkien fan. So.
Yeah. No, I think it was good. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to, things can be all done a little differently, I guess. But I don't know.
Sure.
I thought it was interesting.
You're a well-traveled individual. So if you could give someone advice on one country they could go to, what would you say?
One country?
Yeah.
Geez.
If someone was looking to expand their horizons.
I don't know why it just pops in my head. I'd go to Peru.
Peru?
Yeah, Peru's really cool.
Wow.
It's got mountains. It's got deserts.
Ruins?
It's got all kinds of interesting indigenous healing practices. It's got Machu Picchu, the jungles, the Amazon is there.
How many countries would you say you've been to?
A lot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know.
You've seen the world,
everywhere is, it's pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Europe's incredible. Asia, I don't know.
Since you've had an interesting life, I'd say, you got any, what would be your go-to life advice?
Go-to life advice?
Yeah, for anyone watching, accumulate everything you've learned in your life into a single sentence. Doesn't have to be quite so serious.
I'm taking this from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I would say follow a path with a heart in it. And that comes from the Carlos Castaneda books. But follow a path with a heart in it. That's what I would tell people.
I like
because
that. Yeah.
there's lots of paths, and in the scheme of things, over zillions of years, etc. No path is really better than another path. It's just what you make out of it, and does it have a heart in it? Is it meaningful to you? Are you joyful? Unfortunately, a lot of us learn to follow paths without a heart. We become who we're not. We accept all kinds of things that make us unhappy.
Right.
We identify more with our negative emotions, with fear and anger, rather than curiosity and joy. That's always the negative emotions. They're good. They're important for us to have. I mean, you should be afraid if you're next to a jaguar or something. You should run. Okay, you should be whatever.
Right. Instincts are important.
Right. But chronic negative emotions, always lead, I think, to tremendous unhappiness. Not just suffering for the person, but also suffering from others.
Mm-hmm. Anyway. Thank you for doing this, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I love
it's an honor.
Having our interview last time, and this has been a great one. Thank you so much.
Oh,
you're good.
Now, before we end this video, I want to say a few things. It was my idea to not discuss the bulk of events which occurred after Steven faked his disappearance. If I gave away everything with this video, it wouldn't be very fair to him. Besides, I know many people were curious about what happened that day on the ice and why Steven did what he did. And I think we covered that in good detail. Steven faked his disappearance by walking out on that ice, leaving his equipment, and carefully walking back through the tracks that he made on his way in. After that, he had a getaway car waiting for him in Holland, which hilariously did not work. And you might have caught it when Steven said it, but after that he managed to get a bus ticket down to Mexico. And that's where the story really begins in my mind. The adventures that Steven went on after he disappeared is an interesting and worthy read, and I mean that genuinely. He also addresses many of the issues I was hoping he might have, like his feelings on what this did to his parents and family, or how he feels about all the resources used in searching for him. If this case interests you, then I would encourage you to give it a look. I read it all in one sitting. And as to why Steven faked his disappearance, in short, he did it to try and start a revolution with his co-conspirators. Oh, the things we do when we are young. So the mystery finally comes to an end after many decades of speculation, where people said he fell into a time portal or was abducted by UFOs, or it was the deadly Michigan Triangle. I hate to say that I was right, but please check out the links to purchase Steve's book in the description of this video, or you can search it up on Amazon easily enough. And until next time, thanks for watching.